This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe this one. Because I was the one that said, did you show them the same with the honest? He goes, no, it's not. That's one I. He goes, it's darker than the sleep. I'm not as dark. I mean, this, you can tell. Yeah, I think also we got to pick a pretty good one. Let's get all. That's my phone. Let's get this. Started. I don't think you don't think that would be okay going up there?
Well, it's going to be a departure from the colors we've had. We've gone red, we've gone.
I was wondering,
We should talk about it.
maybe those.
It's him.
Me? It's you. I got a sunburn. It's easy to do this. I know, it's like, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with my head, my forehead or my lip.
Every day the dog stays in.
I have kids coming in, they're like, oh, it's so beautiful outside. I'm like, I feel like I'm in a hole. Because I'm in like the computer lab. It's like,
The worst part now is the mud stuff.
what's that?
Oh,
Taking my dog off.
here, just right there. Hey, Peter. Welcome, everybody, and I'm sad to say this for me is my last Village Board work session, so it's been a privilege to work with everybody over the years, and there'll be one more special board meeting, March 29th, and then I'll disappear into the sunrise, as Andy Flynn has referred to it. And Art will, I think the transition will be pretty smooth and it should go forward without much change. Today, the agenda really focuses on a couple major projects, one of which is the 2023 World Winter University Games. And I'm happy to welcome Ashley Walden and Chris Carroll, who represent the Adirondack North Country Sports Council. I'm not even sure if it's Adirondack North Country or Adirondack or St. Lawrence. It's made some changes. In any event, Ashley and I had a conversation, what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and recognizing that the calendar is getting down to a little less than 2 years before that event is going to take place. It occurred to me that we really needed to start a conversation with local government because there will be a number of requirements on both the town and the village, and the park district, on Florida. And I think we need to get those conversations started now so that everybody is on the same page and knows what's taking place. So with that said, Ashley has an agenda of items that she and Chris will describe. And I give you the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. We appreciate all the support that you've had and all the work that you've done to help the university games be hosted here in Lake Placid. So thank you for that. I know it was a lot of work early on, and Chris and I now get to do that. So,
And a lot of miles.
and a lot of fun.
Well, the biggest thing was convincing people across the ocean that they really wanted to do this and that we could pull it off for them. So you two get to pull it off.
Thank you. And I think, as Craig mentioned, there's just a number of areas as we start to ramp up that there's so much involvement here in town. We're going to go through just really an update and overview of the games to give everybody an understanding of where we're at and what we have coming in the next, 3 months, 6 months, 18 months as we plan for this. And I think there's a lot of areas for integration and support that will just really be seamless if we start the channels of communication and work together throughout all of it. So I'll run you through this. Stop us at any time if you have any questions. you may work on that. Okay.
Tell me what I'm supposed to do.
So this is our promo video that we'll be launching on our new website next week. But you can see, Lake Placid is not unknown to sporting events, but what makes this unique is the sport aspect of it. We'll be looking at 9 competition venues, and I'll run you through some of that in a minute. But, what is the big lift here is that all of these venues being, at a World Cup level for 11 days straight all at once. So this is where really kind of the challenge is, and will come into play, and we'll walk through a number of those in a minute.
And it is, as we said, we have a new website that will launch April 1st. It actually comes out in 4 phases, so if we get closer into the games, there's more functionality. So everything from purchasing a ticket, to finding accommodations, to understanding what medical needs, anything, transportation, anything a guest or an athlete will need will be on the website. It'll be a daily newspaper. So it's really well done by a group out in Rochester, New York. This is the logo, which I guess formally got announced as part of a communication today from the governor's office. There's a mascot competition that launched targeted at university and college students across New York State. But this is a logo we developed several months ago, and we've been working on it, which, as you'll see in the explanation, captures the heart of what the Adirondacks are all about. The U of the arms were required by our agreement with FISU, the International Sports Federation for University Sports, or whatever it goes. You have to have a U, so the arms became the U. The mountains, you can see there, are formed the legs. The next part of it is the head rounds out the human form. And then the next piece in it, what we refer to as the elements, and those elements get used, whether it's for a winter event or a summer event, like beach volleyball. Talk a little bit about, we're able to accentuate the colors and where they fit on this. So this became the logo. It gets locked up a bunch of different ways, either with FISU, where appropriate, using I Love New York. We're using it with the Village logo, a whole bunch of things. So that's the logo, and eventually you'll see it so much you'll see it in your sleep if we do our job well, getting that around the state, which is our goal.
It's exciting. It's all the conversations from the village board. Now you see the logo represents it all. And it's exciting to see it become.
Great.
Yeah, it is fun. I mean, that is, as Ashley says, I always get to do the sexy part of the stuff, designing logos.
That's not the word I use.
And videos, but she might say fun. I get confused. The next page just gives you a couple of fun facts. These are the actual dates, the 12th through the 22nd. Our partner is New York State in this, but we're also working with the USOPC around putting together the best team that the United States can put out on our home snow and ice. This is from an athlete and coach standpoint, twice the size of what we had in 1980. So there's a big piece. In 1972, 46 athletes from 7 countries. So it's grown a bit in the past 40 or 50 years, I guess. It's going to be about fun. This is going to be a giant festival for 11 days with some athletic competitions going on. But playing up on the diversity, not only of New York State, but of all these athletes from around the world, you're going to see that's a big part of what we do, the educational aspects of it. There's a whole program around climate called Save Winter, which will live on as a legacy of the games. All of that will be the story around the games during the months and months leading up, and then during the games after. As the host broadcaster, there's 154 hours we anticipate of broadcast of all the finals, and when it's a team sport, semifinals, so semifinals and finals around that. We have a tentative agreement with a large sports broadcaster to distribute the content around the United States and Canada. We don't have a signed deal, so I won't say the name, because that'll jinx it. But that's going to be a big deal because there's low awareness, and to get that out there, it not only will put Lake Placid in a great spotlight, but it will also help us sell the sponsorships, because now all of a sudden we can give commercial time and all that recognition for them. I talked about the social good. We got a lot going on, and we're putting a team together. It's working great. It's 12 different sports, which you can see up there, everything that you would expect: ice hockey, figure skating, or the big draws from a television standpoint. The cross country out at Mount Van Hovenberg and biathlon, that's a spectacular facility if you haven't toured that yet. We will have a lot of the snowboarding things down at Gore Mountain. Preliminary hockey is out in Potsdam, Canton, and Clarkson, those 3 rinks out there. So we won't be broadcasting out there. And so there's 86 medal events. There's a balance between men's finals and women's finals. All things are equal. They'll have the same size weight rooms, everything that needs to be in there. Actually, we'll talk a little bit more about the venues later. It's 11 days, 50 countries. One of the things that we're doing is featuring the universities. Even though we'll say what country they're from, we're going to highlight universities and all our communications that we put out there. We anticipate selling around 350,000 tickets. That's not individuals, because people will come to town and go to multiple events. But it will, we plan on getting some strong attendance at all of the venues, and we'll start those ticket sales just about a year in advance.
How does that compare to the Olympics when they were here, do you know?
Not as much, but I'll give you, that's a good question.
We sold 50,000 tickets a day. That's all we were allowed to do.
Yeah.
For 80.
We don't anticipate the size of the spectators.
Because of the awareness.
Yeah, but it's a really good question, and I should know the answer to that. Okay.
So I think just for anybody that is newer to the process, why Lake Placid? And Craig probably answer more to this, but there's a number of areas that, looking back in 2016, 2017, when the group that put together the bid, they were looking to help identify some areas that needed change and how to address those issues. The Olympic and University Sport legacy, obviously it's very strong here in Lake Placid in 1932, 1980, but with venues that were aging, there needed to be, a catalyst. There was a need to renovate the venues, and how can we get that done? How could that be accomplished? And I think what's really exciting is that we're seeing that come to fruition now. Mount Van Hovenberg, that Chris mentioned earlier, has undergone an incredible renovation. They're starting the Olympic Center, as everybody's probably seen and heard. The ski jumps are up next. So all of these venues that have been here, not only to host events, but have been training grounds for a lot of developmental athletes over the past 20, 30 years, are getting the modernizations necessary to keep that legacy going here in Lake Placid. So I think it's really important, not only to the heritage, but to the future of it. Community infrastructure, and I think everybody here is probably more aware than I am about some of the other needs, whether it be from upgrades on water and sewer lines, or roadways, increased transportation networks between counties, housing, all of these issues that our community is facing. We're hoping that we can have a positive impact. And then that kind of just speaks to the regional catalyst for regional improvements. Everybody's probably aware of the peaks. We are working, through the, with the developer on this, on the designs for what will be the main athletes village. So we've gone through and identified we need 1,600 athletes will be housed in that facility. So we've taken a look at the breakdown of rooms and units and how we build out dining halls in different areas. But that will be the main athletes village with 2 satellite villages, one in North Creek and one in Potsdam, Canton area. The venue renovations, and obviously this is just kind of a layout map that you see here. The blue line obviously being the Adirondack area, but you can see Potsdam and Canton, as mentioned, SUNY Canton, SUNY Potsdam, and Clarkson University will host men's and women's preliminary rounds of ice hockey, with the finals moving here to the Olympic Center. And then down in Gord Mountain, you'll see the other area outside of Lake Placid. And we are working through a curling venue, which has not been solidified yet, but we're hoping that that will land in Saranac Lake. So I think we spoke through most of these. And transportation, this is a big piece, and I know that Chief Moore is on a lot of the conversations with the security working group and the transportation working group that we have set up right now. These are the 2 areas that of the games planning that are really the most underway and are the most crucial. Everybody will remember from 1980, the transportation disasters. We are ensuring that doesn't happen again. So we have working groups set up with local, regional, state, and now federal representation from the different agencies and authorities. And so they're working together. Each of these groups work independently, but also transportation and security go hand in hand, so there's some overlap. They are putting together transportation management programs or plans, initial draft, I would say, that will then go out to the towns and the villages for all of their input and feedback. This is the business that everybody in this room knows the best. We know how the village, and I say we, but you know how the village and the town functions, and it's really important that people that are familiar with this area and familiar with events are involved in this process. So this would be one of the areas that we're reaching out for input on. So these are some of the areas that we're looking to run transportation routes, and transportation is not just for the athletes and the delegations. It will be for spectators, for workforce, volunteers, security. So these are all the pieces that we're trying to put in play to work out the networks, the distances, and then obviously parking. Where do we park people? How do they get to their venues? And also a lot of the venues will stay open for the public, so for day skiing or other operations. So just trying to accommodate that. We can't just focus on our planned spectators and the delegations and athletes. We need to plan for the unknowns of people that may come and ski or just come for vacation. Accommodations, so this is one of our biggest challenges. For the workforce, we're going to go over numbers in a minute on volunteers. It's in the thousands. Once we start to put in private contractors, think of the housekeeping for the athletes village, all the bus drivers to drive the transportation, the security teams that'll be here, the other smaller workforce that'll be here just for the 2 weeks of the games to help everything flow and function. A lot of them, if they're not coming from locally, will need to be accommodated. So we're trying to work with, we are working with Paul Smith College, North Country Community College, we were recently reaching out to, anything within the area, because we want to be very conscious that we also don't take away hotels that would be utilized for spectators and family, for other public that would come here and benefit. Food and beverage, this is another area. We just actually hired a woman who will start with us in May, who's going to run all of the food and beverage. It's a piece that logistically is a challenge because of the numbers and the volume. We have specifications that it has to be consistent quality from each venue. So if an athlete moves from one place to another, they're guaranteed and they know that they can count on a certain level and a certain selection. With the location and just kind of the supply, it's something that has to get planned out, years in advance to be able to accommodate not only the menus and the requirements from PSU, but also to start to procure a lot of these items and make sure that they'll be here on time. volunteers, this is one of our biggest lifts. We have volunteer needs of around 2,000. And one of the things that is really important to us is that rather than, we are going to launch a volunteer program, but what we want to start here with the community. So we know that this area will continue to host world-class competitions in all of the sports that are here during the games long-term. And so how can we build up a volunteer base here locally of people that may be interested but may need certifications or certain training? That'll be our first approach, because we want there to be a long-term benefit for these events in the future. We don't want to have to be bringing in people from other locations to run these events if there's interest here locally. So that'll be one piece of the volunteer program. Another thing that we're looking at is if we have people in the community that don't want to volunteer in that capacity, but maybe have an extra bed or a room that they are willing to welcome a volunteer and host, that'll be a piece of it too, because that'll help not only expose the volunteers to the community and the people of the area, but also help alleviate some of the issues with the accommodations. So we talked a little bit about the recruitment, looking at an existing pool, but also expanding it long-term. We'd love to get, all the younger generations with starting even at the high school students to be involved. I think they have community service requirements. This would be a great way to find some projects that would be exciting for them and help represent the area. Competition schedule, just you can see on here, I know it's very small, but all the blue are finals. The lighter blue are qualifying, and then the rest is official and unofficial training. So this just shows you by all of those colored blocks throughout the days how much activity is going on simultaneously. And this is where, again, the challenges with volunteers and transportation networks and all of the functional areas that we plan for, this is where it becomes complex because of the magnitude. Medical services, we're working locally with Adirondack Health and Lake Placid Sports Medicine to cover and supply a lot of the medical services. The Athletes Village, we're required to put together what they call a polyclinic rather than duplicating services when we have a brand new beautiful facility 2 miles down the road. We're working with that space to use their x-rays, their lab. They have a separate area dedicated to the athletes and the delegation, so they can come in and immediately be seen without disrupting the regular functions of the Adirondack Health area. So this is one of the ways that we're just trying to be smart about the planning. We'll have the same services necessary for all of the athletes, but without having to duplicate it.
Yes, so this starts to get into some of the interactions and the cooperation we're going to need with both the town and the village, and being somewhat new up here and from a work standpoint, not just spending my summers, just figuring out what's the town, what's the village is enough. We're going to start promoting the games. We have tremendous tourism going on. We want to start using all the street signs to be able to promote the games. We'll freshen those signs over the next 2 years. So we can get that messaging across. Right now, it's creating awareness that the games are coming. Then we'll really start getting into things about ticketing, come spend the time. The idea that these games are being put on for the greater purpose of developing economic growth and drawing a younger audience into this area, all aspects of the of the town. So we need to do a lot of that. We want to put signage at the edge of town, whether you're coming from Saranac or coming up from Keene or coming from Wilmington, those 3280 signs. How do we put another sign in proximity to that the games are coming? We're going to work with DOT to put something out on I-87 in both directions, coming south next to the Canadian market. When we did the research, the interest in Eastern Canada for coming down to visit for the games is tremendous. I mean, they know their winter sports, they know who their athletes are, and so there's a tremendous amount of opportunity up there. So we'll be promoting as people come over the border as well. The idea that we can use all of these intellectual properties, all aspects of the games, the logos, all of those types of things, whoever we assign as spokespeople, which we're working on now, to be a part of promoting the games. So that's a big part. I think another piece is, how do we create, if you've ever been to an Olympics, they have the Olympic Park, which is where a lot of the venues are, but also where all the fun evening activities take place. Medal ceremonies will take place. The opening and closing ceremonies are at the Oval, and the medal ceremonies will take place there each evening. And then that's when the fun festivities begin and drive people up onto Main Street. So all the merchants up there benefit from having these people in town, have music, fireworks, all of those kind of things. So that's all the interaction, who gives us the permit, who launches fireworks, so there's a lot of work that's got to be done on all those kind of things. But to really create that atmosphere, and the sponsors, we have to raise close to $20 million from sponsors. One of the things they're going to want to do is activate their brands to be able to interact with those spectators. So that's going to be that opportunity to do that up and down Main Street. That's a big part of it. As I said, music, whether it's down at the Oval or up at Mids Park, the park across from Steak and Seafood. Naming rights to do things for the University Park and what happens downtown. Current mayor mentioned to us that, we ought to sit in on a couple of those meetings about the Main Street development. So we're conscious about what's going on as we plan things out. That'll be really helpful. So we're not coming up with ideas that are just ridiculous. We're going to have a mascot competition. If this is all about colleges and college students, we're going to have a mascot. But then, and they've done this before, where you get all the mascots of all the universities together and they do silly kind of things, whether if it's cold enough to open up the toboggan run, do races through town, all kinds of things. So all of that fun, festive atmosphere, all of those things are the things we'll be working with you on putting together, the non-competition fun events. Other things, then it's working through some of the more, arduous tasks of making sure that there's power and how we ensure that we have power, whether it's over at the Oval, because the demands, everything from the trucks, we'll have 3 trucks as part of the broadcast. They suck power when they're putting those signals together, and the opening ceremonies and all the lighting around that kind of stuff. So there's all the power needs. We got to work a deal with the town on the transfer station and how we move. Unfortunately, there's a lot of waste that goes along with these things. And one of our overall objectives is how do we minimize that? Ashley's been working with a group at putting a composter at the Athletes Village. So all of that, food waste gets composted and isn't something that has to be delivered out. 5% of all greenhouse gases come from decaying food. So, it's a big aspect of what we're putting together there. We're going to want to continue to work out a beach house. The beach house actually becomes the main press center during the games. So that's going to be something that we're going to need to work against and talk with you both about in the transition.
Can I ask you a question about the composter? How big a scale is the commercial size? Is that something you plan to leave behind or take with you?
So the idea is to work so that it will stay there, because obviously that will be a community with a lot of people living there, so it would stay there. It's, I guess, supposed to be community garden, so we would put it somewhere in that location, but it is a large scale food composter. And so there's a little bit of, maintenance that has to go or work, but it's fairly minimal. So the idea would be, yes, it stays there long term.
Would it be something that the restaurant would be able to handle all that or not? How big would it be?
So I don't think it could accommodate all the restaurants and the needs of that community, but we're looking at a couple of different options. And if there's another place that a second one could be located, we would certainly want to work with that.
There's a high school has one. The high school has one.
Yes, I think it's at the Shipping
Yeah.
The scale might be not as large as you need, but any sort of overflow, I think they would welcome that sort of situation as well.
Yeah, and what we found in the limited research that we've done on, we've been on composting for a while, but is that if done right and separated out, it's not coming from, because we talked initially about the venues and, the spectators and the waste. A lot of it actually comes from the kitchen side of it, right? So, and once there's an education on how things are separated out, it's really easy and it's not, it can definitely be done. And so if there's something, a place that we could look at a second one, we would certainly work towards that.
And there's a lot of grant Mike,
A ton of it, a ton of
some
it.
grant money to do this, and so we can connect on the group that we've been working with out of, so.
PEC has also just promulgated some state regulations that operate food operations, I believe it's with 2,000 pounds a month or more generation, are going to have to participate in this. So we're probably going to see some, I would think we're going to see some commercial activity develop around. There's some now, but I think there'll be more.
And the actual composters are not really expensive. They're really big. They can be about 40 feet long. A lot of times they'll design them to go in like a 40-foot long sea container type thing. Actually, the Wild Center put in a really neat one recently, but they're not really expensive. And, the other piece of it is that at the end of it, once the food's composted, you've got a great bunch of soil for gardening. So it's this kind of life cycle of it.
I just have one quick question. I've been in conversations with Verizon or at least the cell carriers. Oftentimes during Ironman, it's almost nearly impossible to phone call, and for attracting a younger audience, there might be some AR interaction that if they're 5G or whatever.
Yeah, so there's two different ways we're addressing it. So we have a gentleman that recently went around to all the areas and did a tech survey. So he ran everything, broadband, Wi-Fi, cell phone services on different networks. We're giving that report back to the state. We've identified the gaps. And so working with Tank is one of the organizations and a few others in New York State, ITS, we're helping to expand that. Some of it will be, we have to bring in temporary towers to help accommodate it, especially maybe Gore Mountain, some of the other areas. But then the other piece of that is from a sponsorship side, this is trying to work with, a partner that would hopefully, increase it in the network.
Either Verizon or an AT&T who are going to come in and help us with that demand during the games. I mean, we have such high demand to move the signal, for example, from Whiteface into the convention center to then pump it out to the distributors around the world.
I used to have AT&T, but then Skate America was sponsored by AT&T, and you couldn't even make a phone call, as you're watching the sport that they're supporting. So I just want to avoid those sort of situations.
Absolutely. It's
Or
very
Verizon.
There's two other events which the Sports Council has direct responsibility for. Their test events. One is next March 2nd through the 5th, the World University Championships of speed skating. So that'll be the new oval. Gives a chance to test that out, all the timing and everything else that we have there. And then the other test event is that following June of 22 is the World Beach Volleyball Championships. Which is a test event for the World University Games winter. There is a connection. But that'll be a great thing, and that'll be a lot of fun. So we'll be working together, already are actually, with everybody on making that happen. We do have a bunch of other test events we're working with Orta on for next year. I think it's something 12, 14 different events they're trying to bring into town to test out all the new venues, stress test all of that so it's ready for the games when we get here.
Actually, why a summer event? Why not another winter event? Just
Yeah.
curious, because this is,
It's a great question.
this volleyball thing is going to be very expensive for a very low game, if you will.
Yeah, and
We already have winter facilities, so why put this?
I think there's a couple pieces of it. Initially, early on, the beach volleyball event is a FIDU event, so it's run by the same rights holder as the university games. One of the biggest pieces that we have to do during the games is accreditation. So anybody that's a volunteer or is, an athlete, anybody that has any responsibility towards the game, they get an accreditation. And that accreditation system is daunting because there's about 8,500 accreditations. It's one of the things that if it doesn't work well, the games, it's a challenge, it's a struggle. By taking this event, it can help, we can utilize their accreditation system because it's their event. And it's a larger scale than the speed skating. Speed skating also being a speed event. There's not that many participants, there's not that many people involved in it. So this helps us to do a stress test of the accreditation system. And also we're trying to look at, we're trying to reduce the cost, but there's a lot of infrastructure and other things necessary. We're hoping that, those pieces are left behind and can be used by the community. So that's why we're looking at working at the lacrosse fields and having a few that are owned and operated by parks. Any other questions?
That concludes the formal presentation.
Yeah.
All right, question, NCAA, is there any communication? Because, if they're involved, the level of athletes for the United States is going to be much higher. If they allow the scheduling to happen, to let the athletes come here. Is there any communication with them?
There is initially, they kind of got very busy and tied up on other things. We have now reached with the USOCC, so with the Olympic Committee, because the NGBs within there, from the winter sport side, we need the NGBs to be fielding their best teams possible. Because a lot of it, even though there's the NCAA and collegiate side, probably the biggest challenge there is with hockey. Everything else, the schedules aren't as conflicting, and it's more working with the NGBs to field teams. There were some contractual issues that goes really long with a company that the NGBs were then choosing not to send teams. And then basically it was a pay-for-play model, and anybody could kind of sign up to go to the university games for the US. That obstacle has now been, I guess, removed for 2023, only for Lake Placid. So the NGBs will be the ones that are directly responsible for fielding the teams. And for the first time in probably 15 or 20 years now, the USOC is actually providing support, so some financial, some logistical, to get the teams here and run it more like an Olympic Games. Whereas before they had no involvement, so the teams were kind of on their own to go and participate. Now they're going to have that Team USA look, and then it's going to all be driven by the US Olympic Committee.
Sounds great.
In the rest of the world, the scope of the university games is much better understood and known than it is here in the States. And the pay-for-play model, I know when our first experience when we traveled to Kazakhstan, I think that year it was a winter event, and I think we had like 70 US competitors.
The NCAA's control over sports in the U.S. is a unique model. The World University Games are really that championship. If you look at the rest of the world, so we're going to push hard to get our best U.S. athletes here.
The NCAA is essentially the minor league.
Increase the TV viewership.
Yeah, that'll be a big part of it. There's a lot of awareness about these games, but that's going to start ramping up.
Okay, I got one more. What if the pieces development isn't fully built out?
That was the question.
Is there a plan B or?
I mean, the plan B is to utilize as much as we can outside, whether that be, Paulson's or some of the other things, or it's hotel model. So it's utilizing the hotels. It's been the 2021 university games, which were supposed to be in January in Lucerne, Switzerland. They've now been postponed until December. They're using hotels. So it's been done before. It makes transportation, security, all of those pieces very, very difficult. But it's doable by the numbers and by everything. It's doable. It also then makes challenges for.
I mean, just from a practical point of view, I mean, we don't have many workers in this town. Everybody's going to have to be imported that's going to build this. Lord knows where those people are going to stay, it's just to build the thing. I mean, hundreds of men, hundreds of people, to construct this huge development.
It is the biggest,
Yeah.
biggest, slated as our biggest risk right now, just because.
Has anybody spoken to the Weekend Development people? There's like some of the housing, the new housing in West Valley,
Bond Valley.
Mackenzie.
Mackenzie.
I'm sorry,
Mackenzie, right.
West Valley. West
Yeah, it's
Valley.
called Mackenzie.
I have
Mackenzie will-
not really, we have not really been directly connected with that project yet. My understanding is that is supposed to be done by the games, but again, we don't, we'll put together venue use agreements or use agreements for these spaces. but we don't have direct control over the actual construction development. And once it's there, we'll help divide up the space and, figure out who goes where and how we make it work. But it's basically we don't have control over, and it is a risk.
Yeah, it's the biggest risk of all. I think it'd be good to communicate with the people and as a false sake, if you will, with the regional development people and, yeah.
So there is, I mean, the developers are moving ahead. All of our departments have active conversations going on with water, sewer, wastewater, or electric. So I think, I mean, we're behind the scenes, and that's the stuff that people don't see, is there is a lot of preparation work going on for that. But that doesn't include the, and again, you mentioned the power and the lighting that's going to be required for the events. That is something that I think Kimball and Brad in particular are going to be interested in gaining as much knowledge of the requirements as early as possible.
And we've just started, we should have the end of this week, for all of the venues and the spaces, we should have a set of drawings that will show where, the broadcast compound would be, the transportation side would drop off and load zones would be. And I think once those are kind of flushed through, and everybody can needs to take a look at them and weigh in on how this is going to work. And, is the infrastructure in place? If it's not, what do we need to do to get it there, whether temporarily or permanently. I think that'll help guide some of it too.
For the benefit of the current board and the incoming board members, in the town and the village, we have one point person that's been appointed, and that's Haley Green, who's a community development officer, who will be our liaison on a almost, I guess, hour-to-hour basis, or certainly day-to-day basis, with Ashley and Chris and their team, and develop it, and then bring that information back to either the mayor or the supervisor, hopefully both. But, I think the good thing that I see right now is that the relationship between town and village governments is really pretty good. The supervisor and the mayor are in conversation. There isn't a day that we don't cover various issues. So I think communications is going to be a big part of making this go as easily as we can, and making sure that our departments we give them as much time as we possibly can.
It sounds like the liaison between the two boards and this body seems like a full-time position. In aggregate, individually, it seems like you have challenges, but in aggregate, it seems very daunting, and I don't envy the two of you at all, but very appreciative of you. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, and I think
Well,
this is a partnership, right? So
It is a partnership,
We're not
and
gonna
remember that the objectives that the community was trying to reach, Ashley outlined very, very well. That was to get venues that were tired out, rejuvenated, to begin to address the housing issue and to upgrade other infrastructure issues. And, none of this would have been, from my perspective, because it was the village that signed the attribution agreement, would not have been possible without the organization and support of the state of New York. And, the folks in Albany have put a major commitment behind this event, which became the gateway that got the investments that we needed for the venues, and probably indirectly for the housing.
And Jim McKenna as well.
Doing it otherwise.
So Jim McKenna and yourself.
Well, Jim's a visionary. He really is very, very capable. I have to say it's been a privilege working with him.
Well,
Not to
we
mention
are-
the many hours of travel.
Yeah. We are available, any questions anytime, so I guess don't hesitate to reach out. As the mayor said, we work with Haley, and so we can always get a hold of us through her, or we're at the beach house, so feel free to stop in. But
Well, I know your organization is going to grow, and this is a good time for me to announce to the board that Ashley's organization would like to keep the beach house under lease until the end of March 2023. If that happens to suit the board's future directions, and I think that'll be something that you'll be taking up fairly soon, because I think our current agreement is probably,
I think it's expired.
yeah, I think
It's very, next month.
believe
We're
me,
worried we're gonna come in some morning.
we're perfectly happy to keep it.
Yeah.
Now that you mention that, Brad, you're in trouble.
There's nothing really valuable in there.
Just don't break it.
But that has, I mean, your time over there in the past year seems to have worked out fairly well. And certainly it fitted in with the other things that the village uses that for, so.
And I think the biggest thing is that for the actual games, we'd like it to be the main press center. Most times, the press is, in the back of a warehouse space somewhere without any windows, and for them to be able to come and have the beach house, have that, beautiful view.
In 80, we put it in our high school.
It's a great representation.
Is that going to be big enough?
Yeah.
Because there's also press at each one of the venues, so as well.
And is the press center something where you might be broadcasting live every night doing interviews, you want to have a background to see? I know when we had the Goodwill games, was it, the Moose Lodge was used for that?
They may do some of that. It kind of depends on our media distributor and how we're going to set it up, but it would certainly do press conferences. We anticipate a lot of that going virtual now, so there'd be a setup where there may be a few local press for, Northeast Canada. We anticipate a lot of the international press. We're going to make it available for them to access from wherever they are. So that's what we think.
With respect to the street vendors, which are probably more imminent, that's something you would work out, at least within the village with Anita. And we'll certainly work to fit those into the calendar with the other organizations that use those polls occasionally.
We're getting the designs and spec done now, and then we'll put together a calendar request on that. Great, submit that.
That'll be good. And frankly, I think from the standpoint of the community, that's going to be the community's really first awareness that this is coming.
And not to prolong the meeting, you were mentioning signs coming in on all the sort of avenues coming into like Placer. You're not thinking sort of a temporary sign, but maybe something a little bit more, I would say, elaborate, potentially?
Something more permanent, yes.
Okay.
Thinking
Higher quality.
think about the 3280 sign that's there,
Okay.
maybe a different color scheme, maybe see what's going on
Okay.
with the logo and stuff. What's going on.
I figured you weren't thinking vinyl signs. So
We weren't thinking.
Just wanted to make sure.
Something more permanent. We had that conversation with Jay, we talked a couple of times, setting it back far enough so we don't get into a lot of DOT kind of issues and things, which is, those are set back. So, we'll be able to manage that through.
So I love the logo and then like a sort of a 3D sort of like, sort of on a pedestal. That was just those sort of things I could see that people really kind of fit into the aesthetic that they had on. And people appreciate
It puts the town and village in such a positive light.
it.
That's the objective.
Fantastic.
Anything else?
And other than that, one of the other things you mentioned it a little bit is the placement of, if you would, a very visible location in the village where people will start to see, and I know you're planning on some equipment maybe that would, in effect, it would be a park that would be appealing to young people, but carries the theme of the brand. I know one of the locations that you're looking at, and I had Ivan speak with you, I hope he did that, because one of the locations that would be ideal would be #1 Main Street Park.
Okay.
And we're going to be right in the middle of refinishing that this summer, so the timing might be very good for something like this. I think it's visible, people are walking by it. It's probably one of the better locations for something like that, where people are really going to see it and traffic will be in the area.
We're not doing the 2-circle statue thing at One Main Street Park. though.
The wedding rings?
Yeah, the wedding.
We-
That would be nice to put something back.
I still think those could work, but I think they're way too big. And when you're a couple standing below them, and you've got to go like this with the camera to get the top of the rings. Yeah, I think that'll probably get redesigned if it happens. But I can also share with you the fact that with the improvements to the Olympic Center, there's another group out there doing fundraising on Facebook right now to ultimately bring in the bronze statue of the Miracle on Ice, which is something that has been on the drawing boards for a few years
I
now.
can't believe it didn't happen 30 years ago.
Should have happened, could have happened.
Go
And
fund.
finally, they're beginning fundraising.
It's been easier then than now.
So there are some other good things going on around that, I really think there should have been a little more promotion of that. I mean, it's out on Facebook, which is where I saw it, but I think the community should be excited about that, especially people that are passionate about hockey.
Actually, too polite. She's got a vaccine appointment. I'll stay. But let her go if you don't mind.
Keep you
Thank
healthy.
you. Yeah, keep us all healthy, right? I just want to thank everybody and, we really look forward to this. It's a lot of fun. We get to work on it every day, and really excited to be able to work with this group on it as well. So,
I'm guessing the village has your numbers.
I think so. If not, where we live. Well, yes.
They'll give you a key to the door once you're sworn in.
Feel free to
Thank
meet
you,
up on
thank you,
social,
Ashley.
so. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
I appreciate the conversation. I think there'll probably be more of these sessions, and typically a work session like this gives the board an opportunity to ask questions and to understand the project before we have to make any binding decisions, which only get made in open meetings.
Well, and we'll through Haley or directly with the mayor, if there's something important that we think the board should see, so just put it out there and at your convenience. We'll come and speak.
I've already suggested to the village clerk that as soon as possible, she should apply for permission to use the university logo on because we're going to be doing the stationery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Change it.
We've set up a pretty cool process. It's a request form to use it, so we have some control. But more importantly, and then we give a brand guide, but then we know everybody who's requested it. Then when changes happen, we know who to send it out to, so everybody's using the same logos. Some came out from Paul Smith's College 2 weeks ago, and then 2 logos ago. This one's pretty much done.
Did you trademark it?
What's that?
Did you trademark it? The logo?
It's now, we demonstrated usage, actually, today was the first time. So you have to have a demonstrate usage. So now we put the application in, and there's a period we have to wait until somebody comes back and says, oh, no, that's our design. Won't happen, but that's just what happens in commercial trade. So even though we're not for profit, it qualifies under that. A lot of it, the logos, the names of everything, there's a whole big list of things we're in the trademark business of now. It's a lot.
Okay.
That'll work.
Any other questions for Chris? If not, we'll, Mike Ortisley, he and I have been talking about the fact that the town has a local law in the books that governs unsafe buildings or buildings that have been abandoned. Within the village, we do not have that particular device. And questions come up. I think one of the ones that we're getting pretty regularly is why the buildings are built or
I
so.
wanted to get you over and I'll kind of try and set the meeting or such. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Chris,
We'll
thank
see you
you.
at our next board meeting.
I'm not sure where you'll see me.
I know we will, somebody's supposed to budget. See you there.
Sorry, Mary, I didn't want to write everyone.
It's okay. Getting back, Mike several weeks ago had approached me about possibility of the village developing a local law that would govern and give him some jurisdiction over buildings that are either abandoned or an unsafe condition. And he did provide me with a copy of the town's local law, which is pretty short. Basically, it gives him the authority to investigate, report on the property. In all cases, the town board makes the actual determinations as to what happens. But, and then ultimately it's set up so that in the event that in this case, the town has to take an action against the property where there's an investment expense, it gets put on the property tax, it goes back to the county, and then the town gets reimbursed ultimately for it. What I'd like to do with your blessing, I think this is something that we should have simply maybe patterned right after the towns. I'd like to send this over to Janet and ask her to start creating a local law. It'll obviously be the next board that will act on it. But I think that would be some help to Mike in terms, and it might help to address some of the issues with properties that just seem to sit there and don't.
I believe we've had a conversation at the board level about this.
Yeah, I thought we sent it off to Janet already.
Nothing's been done, so as one of my last gestures, I told Mike I would do the best I could to get the board.
Would it be appropriate to put it on the special board meeting, or is it already been noticed for the items?
Let me see.
We want to save it for mayor-elect.
I'll check with Jen on that. If you would like to have it on there, I don't mind putting it on.
Makes sense to me.
Other than that, Brad, you have the floor. You have 3 or 4 items that we thought the board should be made part of the discussion on.
This morning we had a meeting with DEC about the speedies permit. Came out of the meeting basically is this is your new speedies permit. These are the regulations. Basically said that's what we have to follow. A couple of little things on there that we can just we would like. After the meeting, I spoke with Stuart again. And I was thinking about bringing in Todd Hodgson, if he's at all possible, because he was an engineer and did a ton of wastewater plants. Yep. Todd now works for the county. So this might not cost us any money to bring Todd in to do an evaluation. He's the deputy DPW superintendent now for the county. So he might be able to come in, as he is a licensed engineer and his specialty was wastewater plants. So we're trying to go down that route first before we have to look at hiring somebody to do an evaluation. Talked with Peter a little bit, like we were talking about NICOM, and we have spoke with some other wastewater plants that when we mentioned that, they said that might not be a bad idea, because I guess this is being crammed down a lot of people's throats all of a sudden.
There are plants that are being rebuilt right now that weren't given a heads up that this was coming.
Is this what the topic that concerning when we met with Senator, I'm forgetting concerning what the St. Armand supervisor?
Oh, the supervisor over there. Related.
Oh, related.
Yeah, that was like over one certain like aspect of this, but this is, they basically took our speedies permit and it's renewed every 5 years. We sent in the renewal, they sent back, these are all the changes to your speedies permit. And a lot of our maximum limits were like basically cut in half. And then they added a lot of other things that we don't test for now, or we don't have to, like they added action levels to a lot of things.
Okay.
So unfunded mandate, again. So it's shocking.
They basically told us this morning that it should have been in our permit before now. And we didn't speak on that, but we know why. Vince Kavanaugh, when we originally were doing the permit, I don't know how many of you know Vince, he's a super great guy. super smart. He kind of fought off the state for us on a lot of this, is why it's not in the permit, because he didn't feel a lot of these were, these regulations were, there should be some scientific information out in the field, not just somebody creating these someplace else, like the EPA guidelines and everything. They used to go out in the field, look at the waterways that we're discharging into, and they would come up with our numbers we have to meet based on what we're actually doing to the water down there. They're not doing that anymore. They're basically saying that everybody gets blanketed with this. If you're in this certain watershed or you're in a certain area, these are your regulations. What happened when this permit goes through, we had a big cushion. So if you have a little issue or something, we're still under our limits. We've lost a lot of that cushion with these regulations.
So I know with discharge, was it, 94 to 96% of like removal before we discharge?
Well, yeah, we're still, nothing is going to change at our plant, but what's acceptable. And plus they're looking at some other things like ammonia and phosphorus and water temperature, which we never had to meet before. And that was one of the things that brought some of this on. Classification of that river went from C to CT, which is a trout stream. But they've been telling us that for a while, that was going to happen. So maybe the thing, just speaking with some people, when you are at a NICOM meeting, just asking other places, maybe there's some political pressure to maybe just hold this off and maybe not have.
Everybody enforced.
Yeah, it's good. And I mean, just some of these tests, we were shooting out numbers like $12,000 just for one of these tests for the year. That's just one of the tests.
And other tests that are more routine, $130 a shot.
So it gets big just with the testing that's required. So that, we just wanted to fill everybody in on that.
This also comes at a time when our wastewater revenues are, just looking at them today with Mindy, our wastewater revenues are down. I mean, in part, it appears that some of that was created during the early COVID stuff, and that would have been when all our hotels were shut down. So that, we're going to have to watch that pretty closely. But to have this on top of it, and then of course we're in the process of developing additional housing, which will put more process on the plant, which today is more than capable of handling it, except maybe for some lift stations and some lines. But I think
They gotta pay for it. They gotta pay for the usage, so.
yeah. So I mean, these are all things, but I think Brad's recommendation that if we can bring somebody in that's knowledgeable early on, I think that's step number one. Step number two will be to investigate with NICOM if anybody else, because this is going on around. It's not just us.
Correct.
To see if NICOM has developed any directions on it.
So this is to address the speed permit, but also be in anticipation of the other sort of incoming structures being built to be able to accommodate that. Or do.
Yeah. I mean, our plant is designed at 2.5 million gallons a day, maximum flows. We're nowhere near that. We're less than half our capacity most of the time. So that's not an issue so much, but what happens is if you start getting an influx of all these other places on the system, keeps pushing us closer and closer to these limits. You start having, we get up to those action limits, then we're going to have to do even more process things. There are going to be more upgrades. And the plant's only 15 years in. I mean, it was like $15 million to get that plant. And it's only 15 years into its life. The life expectancy before upgrades, major upgrades, was 30 years. So we're only halfway through that. So this might bring somebody in, maybe tell us maybe some process changes we can do, maybe a few things that should be upgraded, but also I'd like to hear from them. Because I mean, the ones of us that listen to it today, they talk above my head.
Well,
they do a lot of what they've shown me.
Was the author.
And yeah, well, and what they talk above us, and it'd be nice to have somebody that can talk that language to say, yeah, when they're coming up with these numbers, that's right. They are using the right thing. The little bit of talk I had with people today, they said, no, they should be doing scientific stuff in the field, not just blanketing everybody. They always used to be, each permit was individual. Like to the body of water they were dumping into. Now they're trying to do it as area wide. So,
Do we still make use in the summer months of the golf course?
yes.
Because it seems to me that that takes that period of time out of play with most of what they talked about today. Not discharging into the
No,
river.
well, that's only a small portion of the whole discharge now. That was,
And it's smaller than it used to be, right?
yes, and it's smaller than what we're, but that's also they're talking about that, like regulating that more.
Yeah.
So that,
Because there's a potential runoff into streams, running streams. Like a
Well,
golf course, but
yeah, we pump it up to a golf course pond,
Yeah.
some of the F1. He uses it for irrigation, so it's not discharging into the river.
Mhm.
But there's still, that's regulated. So, I mean, some of the stuff they're doing is pretty interesting, but some of it, I mean, like Stuart was trying to, and I'm behind Stuart on this, he's trying to Stuart was trying to compare just like mercury levels.
Yeah.
The mercury level going into what they want to keep it going into the river is like 50 times lower than what the drinking water regulation is for
Yeah.
our drinking water.
Stewart's in know both ends of the system, so he brought it up very capably, pointed that out to him. I mean, the Crowder getting.
Better trained than-
We are.
thanks, Alden.
But, so, part of that's just to bring you up to speed on that. Also, the Main Street project, that's the granite that will be going in. These are our three choices for the color that will accent it up near the buildings. We kind of need a choice on that, like, so they can order it immediately.
We did take these up, we did take these up on Main Street, put them in front of, what, 8, 10 buildings, just to get a feel. And we actually had started out with the color brown. When we got up there, we realized that was a mistake. But I think we kind of came down to this diamond shaped piece to go with the granite.
I like the.
What about Saranac Avenue then?
The what?
Neither do I.
Well, that's what I was thinking. You don't think that would be okay for Saranac County? I think it would be.
It's just gonna, now we're gonna go into black sidewalks basically, instead of, if we were red, we'd gone to chestnut.
Less salt.
Yeah, and you wonder what about the heat in summer too, but.
Well, in the summer, they'll be more on the weeks than in the winter.
Sandals.
Yeah, exactly. The darker that it is, the more sun that it pulls in. But if we can give them an answer so they know what to
The
go
bad
start.
news is we need this right away, right?
Yes.
So I'm for one of the two on the side, so whatever.
Yeah, not this one. Looks like concrete. That's what I.
When you say one of the two, are you talking about for the sidewalk in Saranac Avenue or the trim on Main Street?
The gray one to the left and the gray one to the right.
But you're talking about the trim on Main Street, or are you talking about the sidewalk in Saranac Avenue, or both?
I'm saying those are my preferences, unless, like, and if anyone, whoever votes, and it.
Well, what
leans in whatever.
Art's saying is on Main Street, say we pick this one,
Mhm.
we'll have our 6 to 8 foot of granite, and then we'll have this going up, meeting the buildings in the areas that the granite won't work. Do you want to go up Saranac Avenue, just the whole sidewalk in this? Or would you rather go with something totally different?
Because the part from the summit down to the street is going to be done in this.
That's not granite over there.
So we're gonna value,
That's what I
the red brick to the Summit Hotel.
Yes.
So we're just gonna.
But then, so we're then we have to go the rest of the way to Saranac Avenue.
Well,
5 years.
basically, what's going to happen is if you pick this up to the summit, you basically picked what you're going to start changing Saranac Avenue to.
Okay, oh, okay. That's.
Big decision.
Unless you stop there,
Have you
more concrete.
weighed in on this?
I think it should be consistent, whatever Main Street is to get to.
Yeah, but Main Street's going to have a base color and a trim color. We're not gonna have it anywhere else, so it comes down to, do you pick the base color or the trim color, or do you pick something different?
It's a cost situation.
Well, it's a little bit like Mids Park. Mids Park is a color all to its own, and then everything else has been the red brick. Main Street can be a color all to its own, because we're not gonna be able to put the granite everywhere else. So then like,
It's expensive.
right, but I mean, I guess you can kind of see where the color choice goes. It would be interesting to see what that would look like. You know, in a section on the sidewalk, but it certainly would help in the wintertime, the ice removal, the sun, whatever comes through the clouds.
Can
I mean, I like the dark one.
It wouldn't be in this shape.
Yeah.
It would be in this shape.
Often, is that why you like it?
Well, it's black ice, it would be appropriate.
Mark and Jack, I think.
So which one are you guys,
Arguing
which
over.
one are you guys leaning towards, the dark one?
Go ahead, pick whatever you want.
Art and Brad, which one is everybody?
I think whatever the trim color is on
Yeah.
Main Street, it should continue throughout.
Okay, this is the one that they're leaning towards.
I think
I don't know if you can
What,
see.
Brad?
She didn't see it before.
Yeah, it's not one that you saw before.
Oh,
It's somewhere right in between the two though that we looked at.
But not
oh, that
much.
would be good, because the two grays are good. They just have different effects. The brown guys looked a little, it looks great in the room, but when you bring it out to Main Street, it doesn't look as nice.
The only issue the brown one is here for tonight is,
The texture.
yeah, this is the finish of that finish. I believe the blue finish, this color.
It's a very.
I think the other thing I said to Brad and Art yesterday is
Was that?
he also just, I think, got to realize that
You
the,
don't have that,
You know,
but you can.
So we're saying we're accenting Main Street with
that way
this?
you can
Yes.
kind of slick. that-
Yeah, I guess if we're accenting. I kind of like the color of this, but if we're, just to be consistent, like Mark was saying.
The only thing that we found, it can be used or not used, is it's a stark cold color.
Right?
It's a cold color.
It
It's
is.
stark,
And
but
it-
this is a little bit of a warmer color.
It's true.
And if you look at it and like from a large scale.
And plus, we had the advantage of looking at it in the sunlight next to a building. It's kind of hard for you. And I mean, the longer we looked at it, the more we changed our minds. It's kind of tough for you to be in a room with fluorescent lights.
Well, I'll take her out the meeting.
I just say, you know, my thoughts, I think the warmer of the two would be, because I think the darker one is going to be a pretty sharp contrast. We really want that.
And it's going to be the accent of, on the
Yeah.
entry, so yes. Doesn't turn me away yet.
Yeah, she was just asking what color we were picking. So that's your choices, and I mean, they want to get it ordered.
When do you need a decision made? Now?
Yeah.
Mark and Brad did a ton of traveling on these stones, so we're down to this. It's a good sign.
After the 2,000-mile trip back at the beginning, we're picking the first thing we picked.
Yeah, where what we wanted. So, originally, when we looked at this grant,
We're so much more
This is
confident.
Echo Block. Permacon does not speak with us.
once they didn't get everything.
The whole thing, they don't really want that.
And this granite, Silver Comet, that was called, we didn't like that in the beginning, but then all of a sudden, the vein they were digging in, they turned and it turned to this color, and all of a sudden it became really nice. And it used to be a lower priced granite because it wasn't very nice looking. And for some reason, once they turned the corner and got into this really nice stuff, they never raised the price. It's the only reason it's priced is it's within our reach.
And we have enough to go down Main Street.
Oh, yeah, they can produce a lot.
We have big operation.
Yeah. They throw out the train car and up it comes. I guess my choice right now would be the Silver Comet, and this color we didn't look at, although it'd be nice to take it outside, as Jason said. And if everyone thought that this color was all right with the sidewalks, I could live with that. But then the question is, do we want it smooth or do we want the slate finish? Just to give it some texture.
It's easier to clean.
You're right, the cleaning
Well,
purposes.
the cleaning end of it, the problem is if you take the slate finish and you use a snowplow on it, you'll knock the tops
You
off.
can
But
see
we
how
never-
it's already scuffed.
But we never do that. We use a broom. So you could get away with the slate. It just comes down to, do you want a little bit of texture, and a little bit of character? Or, and I don't know, either one of these more slip resistant. So,
I would imagine that they,
Of course, they're not, on the main street, they're not intended to be.
Right, we're talking Saranac Avenue,
Although they're on the side of the hill.
and we very well may continue on with whatever color this is.
I hate to be that guy.
And they produce that once a week.
Yeah.
The sun's out, take it outside.
That's what I'm saying, I'd rather just, like,
You definitely should. Yeah.
Well, when we're finished here, we can go outside with it. You can see it before. We can move on.
Next item we've got is, there's been, for the last year, the town and the village have been jointly engaged in conversations with the Lake Placid Shore Owners Association. And last summer, it had to do with the significant spike in boating activity on the lake. A lot of people that are not familiar with the lake, and some of the rules, we needed more enforcement. So DEC has one officer that has very limited hours that they put her out there. And this summer, they've given her the Adirondack Lodge territory, so we'll even see less of her, I'm guessing. But we worked out an arrangement where we gave them extra manpower, which turned out to be very popular with the shore owners. Amongst other things, they're working on, the town is mostly jurisdiction on this, is working on how close, putting markers up, trying to control speeds a little bit better, not getting so close to the shorelines. There's quite a bit of work going on there, but the town is acquiring, up until now, the law enforcement on the lake has been John Rickard, who has done that for several years. I don't know what John's capability is going to be. He's not too well right now, I'm told. But the town is looking at engaging a constable who will meet more of the requirements of the lake properties. In connection with that, they're looking for a boat, which the town is undertaking. And they're looking for a place to park the boat. And the two choices that seem to be available are either the village launch site where we used to have a dock. Well, some people would like it back, or possibly docking it on the ramp that goes out to the fire on the lake where we keep the fire boat. Bill, you can probably comment more on that.
Well, we've been involved in a lot of meetings, so to go back to what the mayor says, the police department has been sending someone out with a forest ranger. Being that part of that lake is in our jurisdiction, the contiguous lake, we have jurisdiction on the lake. With the exception of the town of St. Armand actually has a small portion way at the end, but can't put smoke. So we've been going out with Megan LaPierre, who's the forest ranger. They are going to hire a new constable. That's going to happen for sure this summer, and John Rickard has retired. So he's going to be done. Those are two choices for the boat docking. It sounds like the Shore Owners Association is going to buy the boat or give the forest ranger a boat full time. And they're looking for the dock space, and I don't think they care where it is, but it's a discussion for you people.
One of the options would be, Brad and I have discussed, I mean, one thing we could do is put the dock back at the village launch site that we took out because it was not in good shape. Probably a floating dock that could be lifted up and pulled in the wintertime, and let them dock that boat there, because it's the boat that's going to be used every day during the season. The other option would be there's, I think, the ramp that goes from the water plant out to the fireboat house. I have seen a couple of times, there's space there where it could be docked. So there are a couple of options. It just depends on what we want as how it's used.
I mean, as far as there's better parking. You can park at the water plant, the other dock, much more parking.
Yeah, that's
probably more secure being at that dock.
We're hoping that both places, if there's a DEC boat parked there, that maybe they'll be a little bit more cautious, Bishop and Wilson, if there's renting boats out. That seemed to be a big problem last year, although they're both doing the best they can. Some people don't know how to drive a boat. That's where the majority of our complaints came from last summer.
So it's not so much a decision right at this point, I think, as we wanted you to be aware of the conversation, and there aren't any other places that boat storage was one of the project. The owners wanted to make a boathouse available that we can actually identify for that purpose.
And then the last thing I have on there, I just was talking to Greg about this. Talked to you a little bit about Ray Brook, but this is something that we really need to get to the town board. They have increased our frequency of testing and what we have to, what we're having to do in Ray Brook. It's going to increase the cost for the town of North Elba. We all know what happens every time we increase the cost for the town of North Elba. What happens. They seem to have a hard time with it. So this is something I want to get out to them early because it's still going to be way cheaper than us to do the water system for them and hire it out. And it's going to get more and more complicated over there as the system upgrades and gets bigger.
So are they taking on the?
We're working on that right now. We're going to do test wells. The first step is test wells to make sure they can supply the prison with water out of the wells. Because right now the wells aren't.
Make sure there's no mercury in them.
And then after, if that's the case, then all the upgrades would happen. But right now, what's happening is Department of Health, we never went over on Saturday and Sundays.
Right.
They're making us go Saturday and Sunday, so we have to pay an employee to go over Saturday and Sunday now. We've already put it, for the next upcoming season, we need to get that out to them that it's going to be quite higher.
We have to
We do
develop
have
a
a-
budget.
Yeah.
And let them make sure they know that this isn't the end of it, once the improvements happen.
Well, I've already had this conversation with the town, but I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that.
There is a written agreement between the town and the water department for that service, support that the department provides. And it's very advantageous to the town.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So are you putting numbers together?
Yes,
So when they do their budgeting in the fall, that they'll.
correct. That's what I'm getting at. But then that's about all I have.
Most of the other departments are up to date and didn't add anything. So depending on your pleasure, we can either open, if there's anything anybody wants to bring up or question, this is a good time to do it.
I just have one more question that I spoke to you earlier about there was, what's everybody's pleasure on the parking permits this summer?
What do you mean?
You're gonna go ahead with the
price?
program?
Oh, talking about the price?
Price and the program. There's gonna be more limited parking, the construction.
I'd like to talk to you about that. I don't think it's an easy answer.
Well, and, you know, one of the things we're gonna have to look at, I was thinking about it the other day, because this winter when plowing out here wasn't so good, I was parking down in the storage lot. There's a lot of permanent spaces there that so far are unused, but with the Main Street project, they may be used. But I think the question for the board is whether, you know, either we're gonna continue the permitting program or we're going to suspend it temporarily. I think that would be difficult.
I don't know if I could supporting the suspension of it, but I can understanding the traffic flows and the numbers and reality.
But I think, there's no doubt in my mind that there's going to be times when some of the permitted parking is going to be affected by the board.
Well, May
So
15th
we
is
can
the
move
date,
it.
so. That's the last day that we're supposed to have. May 15th is
May
what we set for the deadline. So people are already coming in wondering what's going on. So
Okay.
we could just have it, you guys have a discussion, let me know.
You want to hold that one for a bit, Art?
Something we need to get on right away, because it's bigger than a snap decision, I think.
Craig or Art, discussions we had 3 months ago concerning what the prices should be on Main Street, on street versus in the parking lot.
Well,
We almost came to a consensus and
we didn't act on
Yeah,
any of that
do you
yet.
or someone have what we talked about? Because we thought we had a consensus.
I can
Almost
remember
almost
most
a
of it.
consensus.
Almost.
I can remember most of it.
Yeah,
And
I'm pretty sure Craig was
talked about.
writing a lot of notes.
We would have some record of, yes.
Yeah, could you look that up and give it to Art? I'm pretty sure Craig has it.
I think
We spent a lot of time on that.
I know we spent some time talking about increasing the municipal lot. We've had priced at 50 cents an hour, and that was done a few years ago to try to push people off the curbside parking and free up more curbside for customers. But I think at this point in time, you know, we did get, Camden, when it was an active program, used to fill that lot pretty well. It isn't filling anymore, obviously, it won't this year. But it seems to me that, you know, we should be looking at the rate, and we also should be looking at the discussion about, you know, if we're not moving forward with a major rebuild of the parking facility in that location, we ought to at least look at putting a gate event rate system in there.
Or next year.
The other part of the parking project that I actually would like to see us move on, we have progress on the parking lot at the bank, and it occurs to me that if the street contract goes in with the retention basin, that leaves us looking at that wall. So it seems to me we're far enough along now with the design of that what I think we should do is send that design on to structural engineering and get that done. I believe we're going to be successful at acquiring that little sliver of land that remains between the ramp and the museum site and the Bass building, so that we can at least get a design. Whether we end up getting the piece up at the top we want, the property is been purchased by an outside family. We don't know what's happening there.
It's top right.
Top right.
Top right. So the engineering would be done with an option, which would either be with that land or without it. But we need to get the ramp done now while Kubricki is digging. They're going to put that ramp in this spring, which kind of moves the project a little bit faster than maybe we were thinking.
Okay, Brad, who did the survey on the NBT?
So if that's the case, I'll
Was it-
put that, and I'll also formally.
Geomatics state, yeah. Geomatics did all the survey up there.
Janet's gonna need the plots.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, Craig asked me to, I called Stacy's office today.
Pardon?
Yeah, he wanted me to call, we're gonna try to get her up here at
29.
So
Yeah.
Craig sent me an email, I left a message.
We know what backline is, because that's already surveyed, they had it surveyed, black and yellow. In the front line, we know, it's just,
Yeah, I called Stacy.
basically, we just, I don't even.
Stacy's the one that did the survey.
Did she do the work as the top piece where we're exchanging and straightening the line? Has that been surveyed? Because all these pieces are good. Janet's going to need surveys or legal descriptions.
Well, we had corner posts up at the top, but I don't know if it's been like completely marked out the whole line. We just pulled a string.
Yeah, but we had our line surveyed.
Correct.
Hellinger had his property surveyed, so basically, I don't think even anybody has to go in the field. They just have to put it on.
Okay,
Somebody's got to put it on a map.
so you basically want the boundary survey of the lot.
Both properties.
Both properties.
Okay. But that's basically.
With an option of the third.
Yeah.
We gotta go there. one way or another.
Oh, I know, we're just having an option.
Gotta find out if they had a closing here.
That may be a little more problematic.
I'll go knock on the door.
We'll see.
Time to go outside and look at bricks.
Anything else, or do we go out and look at our future sidewalk? I think we can adjourn this work session for that.
You could go up, sidewalk with the berm. It's almost the color of the brick. You look at it next to it.
It looks like outside.
Actually, took it on the one little, based on where you sent it to Sean.
I know, it looked pretty cool.
I get sworn in to do it. They get trusted. Yep.
Every corner of that building is getting.
Or don't.